my grandfather always said is you want to change the world, you've got to move a lot of people or a lot of money. And the beautiful thing with connecting sustainability and data and payments is that you have the power to do both.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, the podcast exploring how to balance profit with purpose in an increasingly complex world. I'm Charlie Martin, your host and founder of TrueMark, the mark of trusted communications. And our article this week is titled Global Trust Data Finds Our Shared Reality is Collapsing, which reveals how people no longer agree on facts, institutions, or authority, leaving trust fractured and increasingly hard for businesses to earn. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that I've got a real expert today to unpack all of this on the show. We have Raja Dabari, CEO and co-founder of Ample, a climate fintech turning everyday payments into sustainability insights, helping consumers align spending with their values. Raja, it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Thank you, Charlie, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, Raja, I think I've almost provided like a sort of a curious introduction to Ample, where people are thinking, well, hold on a minute, climate fintech that's turning everyday payments into sustainability insight. What's going on there? That sounds fascinating and interesting. Let's provide people, before they run off and start Googling and finding websites and things, let's give them exactly some clarity around what you guys are doing.
Sure, happy to do so. So what we simply try and do is make sustainability very simple and relatable. So every time you make a transaction, you can start seeing the values of the merchants you're shopping with. So what this realistically means, Charlie, is next time you use your bank card and you go to a local coffee shop and you make a purchase, next to the merchant name and the amount, you'll see a few eco labels or social tags, which might say that the business is family owned, they're using fair trade coffee or paying a living wage. So what we're trying to really do is make sustainability simple and relatable. So every time you shop, you can start seeing the positive power of your payments.
I love that. The positive power of your payments. That must have been sort of ingrained into the promotional materials from the outset for Ample. I love that. So is this where on my bank statement, I get these icons show up to show me the credentials of who I'm buying from, or where else do I see these? Because presumably I want to be aware of these characteristics of the vendors I'm working with before I make the purchase.
That's right. So where we are starting is in banking, and the reason is the reach. Because the trouble we have is everybody shops on the high street and nobody today understands the impact of their spending or who they're buying from. The other challenges is direct to consumers is really hard. So what we try to figure out is how do you create impact at scale? And therefore, we decided to integrate our data with payment networks and banks so that as you use your card in your banking app, which millions of customers have, they immediately start seeing that data. You're right. We would like to move to the beginning of the customer journey. And we're actually exploring a concept at the moment called Green City Maps. So we can put this data on Google Maps or other maps. So anytime you open that and you're looking for a merchant, a coffee shop, restaurant, fashion shop, you can now start seeing that sustainability data before you go outside.
That's epic. Okay. But for now, what we're doing is almost the kind of reverse engineering of, wow, I'm actually able to learn about how my behaviors in terms of who I'm buying from, well, what are the qualities of the organizations that I typically engage with? And that's it's almost like a feedback loop about my purchasing behavior. Have I understood it correctly in that sense?
Yeah, that's the starting point. It's to give people the right information so they can make informed decisions. And we firmly believe that if people start seeing the values of different merchants, because there's so many next to each other, even if you're shopping at fast fashion, H&M or Zara, they're very different from a sustainability perspective. 5% of people are spending their money there. So if we can inform the population and people, and I firmly believe if they have the right information, they're more likely to make a better choice.
Here, very much on my page, and hence why you and I think, connected in the first place. I couldn't agree more, Raja. What's your method for creating these characteristics, these badges, if you like, for the vendors? How are you verifying that they are what they propose that they are in terms of, fair trade or anything else? Like what's the mechanism for that?
So it's a great question. And I think perfect for, of course, today's conversation around trust and transparency. So the idea here is finding all this unstructured sustainability data being reported by brands or third parties, bringing it together, using multiple sources to verify that information, and then digesting it so it's easy to understand. Because there are a lot of sustainability indicators and different accreditations, but not all of these proof points are made equal. And depending on what combination you have, that's what we translate into a label. And it has a very clear threshold and definition so people can understand what it actually means. Because sustainability is very complicated. It's a lot of work to go through that. So, I guess that the point of Ample is we do that heavy lifting so that you don't have to spend your whole day researching and trying to verify claims, especially in the wash of information and data that's there today, that it's hard to distinguish what's fact and what's fiction.
It's super cool, Raj. I as you and I well know, it's very much in our wheelhouse, and I love what you're doing with this and the sort of vision that you have for it. How did we get here? Like, how did Raja end up running Ample? Like, take us back to, some really significant experiences in your past that have sort of, driven you to do what you've done.
I guess it really started after university. I was lucky to go to South America, and I ended up working with a group of farmers growing and trading quinoa and cacao. So I got to see where that shiny bar of chocolate really came from. And Mother Nature at work, the trees that take years to bear fruit, and the people that are taking care of these trees and doing the hard work of harvesting it, unfortunately often being paid very little for doing most of the work. You then quickly realize that most of the products you see on the high street or on supermarket shelves have a really complex supply chain behind it, impacting real people and of course, our planet. The challenge is as a consumer, you have no idea whether the brand that you're buying from has any ethical practices around it, is paying their workers a living wage. And as we just mentioned, no one knows of the time to do the research or verify those claims. So this is, I guess, how Ample was really born. The idea is making a lot of this invisible information accessible. And I was very fortunate at the beginning of this journey to meet my co-founder, Caroline, and we realized that payments are a touch point billions of people interact with every day. It's a huge opportunity to reach people and share information. So integrating this data into the payment network gives people the information at their fingertips to see what brands are actually doing and whether they align with their values. So you can use your money and your wallet as a vote every time you make a purchase.
It seems to me when I think about what you're doing with Ample that you really have sort of highlighted that the importance of scale and impact in your work and seen, as you've alluded to, the experience of transactions and payments being made and the influence that can then have in terms of providing information at that point. That's the opportunity for really significant change in the way that people behave. Is that what's driving you, the scale of the impact that you could have through Ample?
I think it's the power of connecting people. The reality is I think most people almost all people inherently have good in them and they want to do something, but they don't feel connected. This creates small communities trying to create impact. And like I said, I think scale and like I said, moving people. My grandfather always said is you want to change the world, you got to move a lot of people or a lot of money. And the beautiful thing with connecting sustainability and data and payments is that you have the power to do both. Some people just don't feel like they have the power to make change. The reality is their everyday spending is a power to influence businesses, is a power to influence governments. There's an opportunity to raise the bar. And you just want to make people aware of the fact that they have that power. And that's what we try and do is give people that. And
what I love about, I'm now throwing my own 2 pennies worth into this, but what I love about what you're doing is that, I think about, for example, my partner, Vic, and I would describe her as a very conscious consumer. Like she's almost spent time informing herself as best she possibly can about who she's buying from and ultimately the credentials of the organizations to such an extent that I would say she's sort of beyond the norm, if you like. Certainly makes me feel, not terrible, but she definitely picks up on some of my purchasing behaviors and says, not sure you should be buying from X or Y. But it's almost like you're giving people that kind of trusted, conscious consumer kind of supporter, if you like, or assistant within the Ample's sort of framework. Is that how you think of it? That you're sort of that guide, if you like, that supportive guide on how to make more ethical and conscious purchasing decisions?
I think what we're trying to do is inspire people and encourage them to make better choices. Because the problem with sustainability today is it's people being beaten over the head with a stick. You're not doing enough. You're making the wrong choice. And that doesn't encourage behavioral change. The reality is people every day are making positive impact with their spending. Well, it's buying from their local baker. Or instead of going to Asda, for example, and buying a loaf of bread, they're supporting your local community. And I think change the frame of the conversation around sustainability, showing people that you are actually doing good, because I think carbon calculators are great. They measure and quantify impact. But again, it makes people feel guilty. And this is why when we started the conversation, we're talking about creating positive payment experiences, because you create behavioral change when you encourage people to keep improving. The bar from sustainability perspective, from a corporate or individuals, we're all starting on the journey. And we need help to take steps forward. So instead of looking down at people, we need to help give them a hand up. And that's what we're looking to really do, is just help people make informed choices, not judge them on the choices they make today, because cost, convenience are important considerations, especially in the cost of living crisis. People, number one priorities is keeping the lights on and putting food on the table. We're not there to judge you because you bought a cheaper product that was less sustainable. You got to put clothes on the back of your kids. The question is, if you are going to do it, well, is there a slightly better choice that doesn't even cost more, but is also accessible? You just may not be aware of it. And if we can help you make that one choice, and like you said, influence the 99%, the 1% of the population, like your partner, are doing their homework and making good choices. We don't need to influence them or educate them. The 99% of people don't have access to the information, don't have the time. Cost is a key consideration. It's sharing the information with them easily. So if they have the opportunity, they make one better choice. And one better choice for 99% of people really moves the mark from a sustainability perspective.
I should say I'm definitely going to feed back to Vic that she needs to cut me some slack and be more encouraging and positive about my purchasing decisions. Brilliant. For now, Raja, let's move forward if possible. We've kind of alluded to trust and transparency in some of our conversations so far, but I'm really looking forward to tucking into this article with you. Would you mind just providing our listeners and viewers with just an initial overview and introduction to the piece?
Yes, I'm glad you shared it with me. I think it's a very insightful and timely article. Trust and transparency, the only currency that really matters. So I guess the way that my takeaway and my thoughts are, look, in the age of influence and manipulation, trust is really the most valuable currency that we have. People are making confident, misleading claims. There's no shortage of greenwashing, a flood of AI-generated content. So today, there's no lack of information. The only shortage is credibility. People are also very tired of all the deception. When you don't know what to believe, your circle of trust shrinks. And I think that's also what the article highlights, right? It's not only shrinking, but it's fragmenting. People are not relying on the mainstream media or traditional government sources of information. They're looking and retreating into smaller groups, sources that they can feel they can trust. And this shrinking also means that the echo chamber grows. And of course, that can be very dangerous, especially when you layer AI on top of it. More content, more noise. It becomes harder to distinguish what's real, and it amplifies the problem. And I think the article again is so how do you rebuild trust? I think that's where it takes us to. But before I jump into that, I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on the article as well.
Raja, no, I think you've provided some observations of the absolute key elements of the piece. I think the piece was written off the back of Edelman's 2026 report, which is well worth checking out in terms of their trust barometer piece, which happens every year. The one thing that I thought, a particular thing that I thought was quite interesting, was it was talking about trust in government and versus trust in business. And I think it alluded to the fact that although trust in general is obviously dwindling across the board because of exactly the reasons that you've just described and introduced, actually what's also happening is that trust in government is reducing to, and media and journalism is reducing to an even greater extent more quickly, and that actually trust in corporations and business is the sort of last bastion, if you like, of hope in many ways, in terms of trust in organizations of that nature it's still sort of sustained to a certain degree. What I thought was particularly interesting about that is it really does shine a light on the responsibility that the corporate communicators have in sort of almost like bridging the gap, or of hopefully changing the way that the individuals view trust in the organizations that they engage with. So yeah, that was just I thought a particularly interesting data point from the piece as well.
Yeah, it presents a great opportunity for businesses, and at the same time, it's a very big responsibility. It's important corporations move away also just from making big, grand statements and claims, but make sure now that actions are meeting the words that they put down, right? And also showing up to customers without always expecting something in return. I think this is something also that applies to society. Everything has to move now beyond the transaction, right? It's not merely an exchange of goods and services. It has to move towards real relationships. And customers have to know that you have their best interests at heart, because that's how you build trust and sustained loyalty. Otherwise, it's going to be very short-term orientated, and trust nowadays and customers are fickle. Also, they very quickly smell BS, and they can read between the lines, especially the younger generations are much faster at doing that. So brands have a responsibility, and they need to live up to it real quick. Otherwise, they're going to lose their customers just as fast.
Okay, if trust is an issue, trust is an important currency for any business in the modern age. Like, how do we go about building trust with our stakeholders? What are the key components?
It's a good question. I think trust takes time to build. It's like any type of relationship, and it means that you take small, consistent actions, that you are always showing up to support someone in good and in bad times. That you are authentic and real, and that they can feel that, because trust is an emotion. It's not just a transaction. So I think it's very important to, I guess in some regards, wear your heart on your sleeves. Let people feel who you are as a person and as an organization. Interestingly, there was on LinkedIn, I recently saw this ad about McDonald's CEO eating a burger, and of course the CEO of Burger King eating the burger. And one was perfectly staged, right? Burger King CEO was wearing the apron, taking a big bite. And the McDonald's CEO, you could see his character. He's I guess, he's not necessarily the best salesman per se, but he was being himself, sitting there in his clothes in the office, probably eating a burger the way he would. And I think it's interesting to see it's the authenticity is what people are looking for. Authenticity and that transparency around who you are and what you're doing. I think that builds trust. And like I said, making sure that you consistently show that. This is where brands, I think, or the brands of the future will succeed, is walking away from the greenwashing and the marketing. Also, I think it's a big generational difference when you look at content. Our generation used to make sure we polished all the content. Everything was, the lighting was good, but you look at the content that resonates today. It's people on their mobile phone talking off script, just being their authentic selves. That's what resonates. That's what people connect with, and that's what we have to go back to.
I think that's an incredibly shrewd observation of how, as you say, the content that we are sort of attracted to, that we engage with, has evolved in terms of its production quality. And it lends itself actually to a point in the article as well about, you look back as the sort of the last 25 years and the advent of the explosion of digital, and in particular social media and self-publication, and the fact that we moved away from those kind of core sources of information and truth that we had before, the limited number of TV channels, the limited number of major publications that we would get our information from. It's almost like it's meant that sort of, you used it personally, that fragmentation, if you like, of information sources lends itself to more authentic content being produced as well. Is that a fair observation in terms of where we are with the type of media that we want to engage with?
I think so. Like you said, it is becoming more fragmented, but the problem is, as well, as our attention spans are getting much shorter. Whereas I feel like my dad or myself used to sit down, read the paper. It might take 1 or 2 hours front to back. nowadays, even myself, I'm digesting sources of information in snippets and then pulling together a picture, and that's forming my view of the world. And every day I'm adding and stitching something else towards it. So how true is that of what's actually happening? And this is the challenge, right? Because it's becoming more fragmented, it's also becoming shorter snippets of information that we're relying on, which makes without the depth of it, it makes it less credible. And therefore, I think in the age of information, credibility is going to be the most valuable thing. Someone needs to do the research to verify the claims. And it's just easy to absorb something quick. And also we like headlines, right? I mean, we're driven by dopamine. So we see a headline we like, even if there's a bucket of information and news, we just focus on the headline, the celebrity that's done something outlandish. We start forgetting the meaningful information and just absorbing stuff. And one thing my wife rightly said, you're sitting there scrolling through information or looking at content. An hour later, you don't even remember what you've looked at.
It's so true.
You have no idea what you've even absorbed. So what we kind of need to go back to is picking up a good old book and actually looking at some quality content to actually learn something. And this is a generational challenge. This is a biological one, right? The ecosystem is such that it's there to drive our dopamine levels and increase engagement. Whether it adds value to the question.
Roger, can I ask you something on this? This slightly segues out of the kind of trust conversation that we're having, but I'm fascinated to get your view on this. Someone described to me the other day, they're like, if you think about our relationship to information now in 2026, and you think about it, it's almost like they described it as like we're basically sort of an overweight adolescent who has been gorging for the last 25 years on basically crap food, i.e. like unsubstantiated, poorly put together, kind of from a journalistic perspective, information. And we're essentially an out of shape, overweight teenager who's just eaten his way through X amount of chocolate and crisps and all the rest of it. And his point was, we now need to go on a bit of a diet when it comes to information. And we were talking about, well, what does that look like? Because we're all, as you say, exhausted with the amount of information, the amount of messages, the amount of sources of contact, even with our messaging apps and our social media profiles, etc. We're just exhausted. Like, how do we row back from where we are at the moment, which is being drowned by, if you like, the amount of information that we can engage with?
I guess sometimes it means, in my opinion, switching off from digital and going back to analog. Like you said, there's no shortage of digital information coming your way. The problem is you'll end up listening to echo chambers, right? Once you go into one channel, it'll feed you more of the same. I think it means getting your library card out, going to the library, picking up a book and looking where it clearly says different sections on different subjects, and just we need to re-educate ourselves and stop relying on other people to educate us. And that just means, like I said, sitting down, trying to study something, looking at more than one angle. The analytical capabilities is where we add value. And the information that's being fed to us means we no longer need to analyze things. And the less you analyze things, the less you understand, the easier you are to persuade. Because you don't have your own opinion on it. And I think we need to go back to basics.
I want to get into some practicality. You described beautifully how the nature of the content that the corporations produce, it's that consistent authenticity, if you like, and perhaps authenticity looks like not being perfectly polished, which I think was a great observation. That's the kind of blueprint, if you like, for content that builds trust with your stakeholders. Can I just ask you more broadly, though, about organizations going about creating kind of trust strategies? I'm starting to hear this more and more when I speak to people through our work at TrueMark and the Charter, that organizations are sort of creating specific strategies that are designed to say, well, look, how are we going to go about cultivating, building and nurturing trust with our key stakeholders? Is that something that you think, because of the importance of trust, that more and more organizations need to do, is to have a specific strategy designed to generate trust in their business? 100%.
And I think that the way you go about doing this is very similar to sustainability. It's a journey, right? There's going to be a roadmap, and you just have to be honest with people as where you are at. No one's expecting you to be 100% sustainable and do everything right. As long as you tell people where are you at today and show them, right, this is where we're at. These are the problems we have. These are the things we need to improve. We recognize that. Just be honest as to where you are and recognize what you need to do. And then create a strategy and a plan to improve. Something that's realistic. Because if you say in the next 2 years, we're going to transform our entire business and we're going to be 100% sustainable, it's not going to happen. Supply chains, as I mentioned earlier, are super complex. They take time. It requires patience. And that's okay. As long as you share your journey and even if you don't if you don't hit the target, but you explain openly and honestly why, people can understand that. And I think that's what the strategy needs to be. Simply saying, this is where we are now. Be open and honest about it. This is where we want to go. And this is how we're going to get there. And we'll share with you the journey on how we're going and whether we're making good progress or we're not making great progress. Because there are so many factors that are out of your control, right? Whether it's the war in the Middle East and the impact that has on supply chains, prices of inputs, your access to labor, shipping costs. These are not all the things that you can account for today. You can have them in your plan and you can bake certain things in, but life has a way of taking over. And again, people experience that in their personal lives. So that's something that they can relate to. And that's where I think we need to start.
What I love about that is it's essentially a one-size-fits-all trust strategy for any organization out there. So guys, whoever's listening in right now, you are more than welcome, and we'll add it to the bill. Raja, I'm interested now to get your view on what you're going to do with the magic wand. So if I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
The commercial world today is largely driven by short-term incentives, stock prices. Without a long-term view and vision, it's hard to build anything that's truly sustainable. Sustainability, therefore, today is seen as a cost center, not something that create opportunity or is actually going to be your driver of long-term returns. The reality is today almost anybody can make any product. And like I said, what people are really buying is the brand and how it makes them feel. This has never been a more important moment for businesses to understand that sustainability is not a cost. It is an opportunity, and it will drive your return on investment in the future. We need to move away from short-term targets and incentives and have long-term visions, because God willing, we're all around for the next 100 years. So you may get your stock bonus in 4, but you have yourself many years to go and your kids. And we need to take a step back and look at that future and build for that.
One of the things that we're talking more and more to organizations about is the missed opportunity that stopping communicating about sustainability has on building trust with stakeholders, and how suddenly you can start viewing the way that you communicate about sustainability as being one of the best levers that you can pull in building a trusted relationship with your customer base, your employee base, et cetera, et cetera. With your view on sustainability and the need to think about it from a long-term perspective and make it an incentive for businesses to engage in, is that a fair observation? Is that the way that we need to think about communicating around sustainability to make it attractive? It's the here and now because of the trust that can be generated as a result of communicating about sustainability. Just your view on that.
I couldn't agree more. Look, my opinion is communication is the most powerful tool people and businesses have to connect with others. So as soon as you stop communicating, you automatically fracture connection. And whether you're doing something good today or not, I think businesses with regards to greenwashing are scared people are going to come after them with pitchforks. And I think that fear will be removed when people again realize that if you communicate and are authentic, they won't look to punish you. They will look to support you, and you move away from fear towards empowerment and support and create a community around you and your business. So communication is the most critical and valuable skill any of us have. And businesses need to realize that as well. So the more that they invest in it, the better they will do.
Hear. I thought I might get a hear when you suggested that you were agreeing with everything that I was the way that I was positioning that. But alas, maybe that's for the next show. But for now, Raja, thank you so much for joining me this morning. That was fantastic to hear about the work that you're doing at Ample, and we're going to be following closely here at the Responsible Edge. So thank you again for coming on.
No, thank you, Charlie, for all the great work that you're doing, and it was great chatting to you today. I look forward to doing it again sometime.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to Raja Dabari for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted communications. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.